All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Launch Minnesota Friday Forum. We do these on the fourth Friday of each month. And now this month, we are going to be interviewing a few Launch Minnesota grant recipients about their startup journeys, what they're currently working on, what have been some of the challenges and successes so far to date. So I will let them introduce themselves here. Jeff, you want to start us off? Tell us a little bit about yourself and Morari.
Yeah, well, Jeff Bennett, CEO and founder of Morari Medical. My background is in the medical device industry. I spent over 25 years specifically in product marketing. Started my career at Medtronic many years ago, went to Boston Scientific, and it was at Boston Scientific that I had this crazy idea that I decided to form a company around. So we're in the sexual health and wellness space, which has its own unique challenges that I'll speak to later on.
Cool. Thanks, Jeff. Ashley, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Mooneyham. I'm the founder of Mommy's Solutions. I come from a background of a PhD scientific background where I studied women's cancer chemoresistance because I've always been really passionate about how scientific discovery can impact women's health. After my PhD, I went on to become a professional grant writer where I really learned about how to convey the market opportunity and scientific foundation of new business ideas. And then I became a mom in 2021 and realized that there's a huge gap in the market in terms of women's health when it comes to breast pump performance. So I invented a product to improve the breast pump performance, and that's what Mommy's Solutions is built around.
Cool. Thanks, Ashley. And Michael. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just got here. I'm having camera problems. Just restarted my computer. What was the question? I just got here.
I'm sorry, Michael. We got a panelist also called Mike. Also,
I'm sorry.
Also named Michael today. Michael Peterson. I apologize.
Sorry. Thank you, man. I didn't know I was on mute. I feel like I'm not a very heady person in this conversation, as we have doctorates and people that know far more about the body than I ever will. But there's actually some similarities. I founded a company called Razorhood, and I had spent a big chunk of my career in the automotive sector as an engineer, and then later went on into high tech. And now we're trying to bring those two pieces together. And the objective is to solve problems that are, quite frankly, fairly kind of blue collar-esque in nature, but it's the fact that we all really dislike bringing our car to the shop when it breaks down. So the question is, can we apply artificial intelligence, big data sets, kind of a gig economy back to mechanics and others and extract their expertise to help customers out directly when their car goes sideways? And we've been in market now. We've been in the company was formed about 18 months ago. We've been in market now for a month or two, and we just went through the Minnesota Cup and we did well in the tech division, and so here we are trying to help out real people with real problems.
Yeah. Just so people can learn a little bit more about each of your companies. I know that each of you has had some really exciting milestones within the past year. Would you be willing to share a couple of accomplishments, whether that's, Min Cup success or startup raises? I think that would be really interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, sure.
Jeff,
I can jump in. So we were Min Cup semifinalists, which was great. Happy to have that opportunity to get that mentorship. I mean, there's so much that the Minnesota Cup can bring, even if you don't win it. But we formed some relationships and got some guidance, which has been invaluable for us. So for us, in terms of key milestones this year, we raised a crowdfunding round with WeFunder of $642,000, which we closed earlier this year. So maybe we can speak more about that later if people have questions about it, but a lot of work went into preparing for that. But we were really, really happy with the performance because we built this community of followers. Not only are they investing in the company, but we believe they'll be customers at some point in time when we're commercial. And then from a product side of things, we had Design Freeze. And so, basically we've developed a patch that men wear during intercourse that uses neural stimulation to delay an ejaculation. So it's kind of crazy when you think about it, but most people are like, you're doing what? But when you start having that serious conversation, premature ejaculation is a significant issue for millions of people around the world. 30% of men can't last more than 2 minutes in the bedroom. And ultimately, it's about partner satisfaction. So our product, because we're delivering neural stimulation, has to go to the FDA for safety approval. And part of that is you got to design freeze the product and then do the data testing to get the data to submit for the FDA. So we've frozen that design, and we're in the process right now of conducting the safety tests necessary for FDA clearance. So that's very exciting, and we're hopeful that we can have that testing done by the end of this calendar year and then submit early in January. So all funding contingent, of course, and I know we're going to talk about funding later. So
Yeah. No, I ran into a couple people during startup week who were like, I would love to know more about crowdfunding. And I'm like, I personally don't, but I know a guy who does. So, yeah, I'm interested to hear about that later. Ashley, tell us a little bit about Mommies and some of the exciting things that you've accomplished this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a breakthrough year for Mommies, and I'm super grateful for it. And truly, it all started with the Launch Minnesota Innovation Grant that we were awarded in January. So thank you to Launch Minnesota for being kind of the first stamp of approval on what we're trying to accomplish. After the Launch Minnesota grant in January, I entered a pitch competition called the Hy-Vee Opportunity Summit. And that is a regional pitch competition that focuses on women and minority-owned businesses. That was hosted at US Bank Stadium in February. And I actually was able to take home the grand prize, which was $30,000, which is a huge pitch competition, non-dilutive funding in the door as well. So a great start to the year. I followed that up by pitching at Wale Tank as well, which is the Mayo and University of Minnesota Life Science pitch competition. I was in the junior division because I'm still very early R&D and prototyping, and I was able to get first prize there, which was exciting. And with the momentum from those pitch wins, I did open a pre-seed raise that is currently ongoing. We filed our non-provisional patent in July, and then I also participated in Minnesota Cup this year and made it to the finals. And then literally just this week, we got the notice of award for our NIH SBIR phase 1 grant application like days ago. Yeah, so that's super exciting. I would be really happy to talk about kind of the non-dilutive funding pathways that we have utilized to get our startup off of the ground. In some ways, for some types of business ideas, honestly, I found it to be somewhat easier than VC funding, especially as a women-owned business for a women's health product. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that too, but really grateful for this year. I'll add the disclaimer that in all of 2022, it was only no's. So, just keep going. 2023 has been great so far.
That's awesome. And Michael, it's been a big year for Raise a Hood too. I feel like you were a bit in like quote unquote stealth mode for a while, and then there's been a few big accomplishments this year.
Yeah, I think our dynamics were a little bit different. What we're trying to do is we're trying to help people out when their car breaks down. And what's unique about the solution that we're trying to deliver is that, when I listen to what Ashley and Jeff are building here, it's typically kind of a very focused design solution element. And ours is on the opposite end of the scale. There are currently about 600 different makes and models of vehicles that have been produced in the last decade in the United States on cars. Coupled with each vehicle has on average 300 to 400 different individual problems that are fairly common, which means that we have about 1 million individual solutions that we're trying to come up with. So instead of having to come up with one solution, we have to come up with 1 million solutions. And I'm not exaggerating the numbers either. So I think some of the things that we bumped into was just how do you try to solve this problem of a very massive scale? And for us, we recognize that we can't solve it alone. So we treat our business more like a Spotify, where if you guys listen to Spotify or Apple Play or whomever it may be, is that you don't listen to, you listen to your favorite artist through Spotify. You don't listen to Spotify. And so we look at our platform as a SaaS model the same way, is that the expertise that we're trying to unlock is the expertise of mechanics and crowdsource and other elements. But we make no bones that we are the only person that knows the answer, quite the opposite. And so ours is really about how do you amalgamate all that information in the same way that if you look at Wikipedia, the person on the other end that is writing Wikipedia is who you trust. It's not Wikipedia in and of itself. And so we were stealth mode for about a year as we were just trying to put together a lot of these big chunky elements because we built an artificial intelligence engine, hundreds of solutions out there, and a bespoke website. And I do think that some of the things that we bumped into, people kind of went, hey, I like the idea, but that just seems like maybe a really expensive business to go build. And I'm going to have to spend $1 billion before I actually start getting revenue. So I think it took us some time to kind of push through some of that. We have had some nice accolades recently. We've had some good, okay grants, decent grants. We did win the tech division, Minnesota Cup. And I think the thing that I found through all of this is that always trying to surround yourself with good advisors, a good board, with people smarter than you. And if you can't tell your story and convince early investors and your board and early VCs and whatnot, and you're getting pushback, then you probably want to go back and either look at your story or look at your premise. And because I felt like we were in a constant, I don't want to say flux, but you're constantly tweaking and adjusting your overall message, your strategy, your pitch deck, what's your differentiable position. And, if you're having a hard time selling it, it's probably for a good reason, and listen to those points of view very carefully and make adjustments. Of course, don't give up on your plan, but there's a lot of fine tuning that has to happen to get from the beginning to the point where it's actually a viable business.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great segue. So let's take it back to the beginning. Let's can each of you share the story sort of behind the inception of your startup? What inspired this particular venture, and how did you identify the problem or the opportunity that you aim to address? We can do the same order. Jeff, you want to start?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, my background is medical devices. So I worked at Medtronic in the neural stimulation business, and I managed a product that used electrical energy to manage chronic pain. So that's where I got exposed to the idea of electrical energy being used to treat various different disorders around the body. And then went to Boston Scientific, spent some time in the urology business, and that's where I got exposed to sexual health and wellness. And I was good friends with a Harvard-based urologist at the time. And I had this idea of some sort of wearable patch that, could delay an ejaculation. And I went to this physician. I said, what do you think about this idea? And he said, Jeff, brilliant idea. But more importantly, do you understand how big of a problem this is? And, he's the one that informed me of 30% of men can't last more than 2 minutes in bedroom. And I'm like, that's not true. I can't believe that. He's like, that's my point, Jeff, is that men don't like to talk about it. And I, as a physician, don't like to bring it up because I'm not happy with existing treatment options. So that was kind of that aha moment for me. And then I went through the G-Beta Accelerator program that Adam Cho led a few years ago. And I really used that opportunity to kind of put the business plan together, test the idea, test that product market fit with some advisors and some input, and really thought, okay, there's a business here. So I rounded up a couple of my friends, business partners, where we put our own money in and participated in a Procter & Gamble pitch. And we were one of 4 companies that Procter & Gamble invited to their first ever innovation pitch. So here I am sitting in Las Vegas at the Consumer Electronics Show in their booth, presenting, saying penis, sex, ejaculation, and we ended up winning the pitch. And for me, that was kind of that aha moment, like, wow, if Procter & Gamble can be interested in something like this, why can't anybody? Because they arguably have some of the biggest brands in the world, and here they're allowing me and selected, us as the winner of the competition. So that was kind of that, another fundamental moment for us. And then finally, it was, we participated at the Consumer Electronics Show a few years ago in the startup area. So for $1,000, you get a startup booth, and there's thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people that visit this meeting. And we generated a significant amount of PR, organic PR. So written up in Men's Health, Forbes, Engadget, Gizmodo. And again, that was that opportunity to say, okay, we've got a business opportunity. We validated the product. We validated the market opportunity. Now we need to design something around that. And that was the start of the fundraising that we went forward with.
Awesome.
I have a question if I can.
Yeah, go for it.
A little bit like a disconnect, consumer electronics and your product. You want to speak a little bit more about how, was it open to everybody, or was it specific for a certain? I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, good question, Candy. So yeah, consumer electronics, what we have is electronic device. We don't see it as a medical device. It uses electronics. It's an app-based, it's app-enabled. And yeah, it's kind of that unconventional, you went to where? The Consumer Electronics Show? But it was the first year that the Consumer Electronics Show had, quote, sex tech as a category. So for years, they didn't allow companies that had sex tech products to exhibit there. They did that year, and it was a trial year for them to see what that response was. So we were a little like, well, we're still early. We just have a concept, but there's no guarantee that sex tech was ever going to come back. Well, it turns out that we, along with some of the other sex tech companies, stole the headlines. So, Apple and, Amazon and Samsung, who spend millions of dollars to be there. I mean, here you have this Minneapolis-based sex tech company stealing some of the headlines, but it goes to show that sex sells, right? It gets headlines, it gets people interested in it. So, for us, it was a huge, milestone in the company.
Thanks for the clarification. I didn't realize that it was tech-based.
Yeah.
My light bulb was on.
Perfect.
Very cool. Ashley, tell us a little bit about the origin of Mommies.
Yeah, so you guys already know a bit about my background. Like I said, I became a mom in April of 2021, and I had an 8-week maternity leave, which I had no trouble breastfeeding, which I was very grateful for because it is the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation that babies are breastfed through 6 months of age because it's an unmatched source of nutrition that evolves with your baby's needs. So I had my eyes set on that goal. I was having no problems with nursing, but when I went back to work and started using a breast pump, I was really devastated to find out I could not collect enough breast milk through the breast pump to feed my baby. And it felt like I was forced to stop my breastfeeding journey early because of the limitations in the breast pump technology. And it was really frustrating. And as I looked into it more, obviously with my scientific background, I searched for ways to improve my own results personally first. And I found that there were studies that show if you manually apply warmth and pressure while using a suction mechanism breast pump, you can increase the milk output in less time. And that's exciting, but shockingly, no product offers that. No product on the market offers warmth and massage to the breast while you're using a breast pump. So before I opened my business, I actually threw out a customer discovery survey just to see if my pain points were shared and to kind of validate the idea that was starting to form behind my business. And I was shocked to receive over 1,200 individual responses in less than 24 hours. So I think kind of similar to Jeff's story, the initial reception was a light bulb moment for me that this problem is extremely ubiquitous. It's extremely important to mothers. It's only becoming more important as women achieve equality in the workforce and really want to provide for their baby remotely, but also not spend too much time or discomfort doing so. And yeah, it led to the beginning of Mommy Solutions.
Awesome. Great story. And Michael, you told us a little bit about your background, but tell us again, how did you get the idea for Raise a Hood itself, and what was that process like?
Well, I guess I would turn it around to everybody on this call, because I suspect everybody on this call has a car. We almost have to have one in the cities to get around. And we've probably also all suffered from having it break down or an issue arises. Sometimes you just bring it to the shop, but most of you have taken the time to go, oh, my car is not working properly. I'm going to at least look into it online. And if I asked you where you went online to go get good, credible information, where did you go?
YouTube.
Exactly. And that's the number one answer we get, which is, hey, it's better to have YouTube than not. The downside, what we found is the majority of people on YouTube is they're not professionals. There's more people talking that know what they're talking than what they know what they're talking about. The professionals don't get involved. And the number one issue people have is diagnosing what's going on, not actually just changing nuts and bolts. And so just like you might go to WebMD or John Hopkins or the Mayo.com for good guidance for medical information, and it's credible, there really doesn't exist anything in the automotive space for that same site. There are a couple of sites out there that try to do that, but what you realize is you get into these sites, and after about 3 minutes, you're not the customer. You realize you're not the customer, you are the product, and they're just taking you and they're converting you into a lead gen, and they're trying to get you into a local shop. And so the whole premise of the business is, if you look at this whole tech stack and the customer journey from the time my car breaks down to the time you have to bring it into the shop, there's a lot of money being spent in terms of optimizing that tech stack. And it's good. And they're trying to drive more people in the door and improve customer satisfaction and improve operations and, crank up gross margin and net margin and everything else. You're trying to make the existing ecosystem work. And our idea was fundamentally different, to say, well, what if we try to break the existing ecosystem? What if the existing ecosystem is outdated? Because I would argue that, you get your car fixed today the same way that your parents and maybe your grandparents did 50 years ago. And that's, you call up the shop and they say, bring it in and we'll take a look, and you're back to, being stuck in the ecosystem. So our premise was, can we change the ecosystem? And because maybe the ecosystem isn't really optimized the way it should be. So anyway, and the fact that I had some automotive background and a little bit of a passion there, which was kind of a common theme, I think, that you're hearing from both Jeff and Ashley as well. We tend to come up with ideas because it's a lived experience. I'm not even a fan of that word, lived experience, but I think that in this case, it's a truism, right? You come up with the idea because you're struggling with whatever there is in the marketplace today, and all of a sudden you have this aha moment. I love Jeff's story about, talking, having deep expertise in neuro and electrical stimulation, and then talking to a surgeon or oncologist and said, yeah, this is a really common problem. And you kind of go, oh, I can put 1 and 1 together and actually make 3.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So we know starting a business often comes with numerous challenges. So could each of you highlight a significant obstacle or setback you encountered in the entrepreneurial journey? How did you overcome it? And what sort of valuable lessons did you learn from the experience?
Yeah, for us, a couple that I talk about, one of which was recruiting for a feasibility study. So, we had this concept, we knew neurostimulation works in all areas of the body, but we need to show that it has some sort of efficacy, worn for the intended use. So with any sort of sexual health and wellness product right now, social media, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, they ban advertising for that. There's advertising for men erectile dysfunction products, but anything else, there's bans. So we were trying to recruit for the study, and we wanted couples to be a part of it. And that in and of itself has challenges, to get that couple commitment to participate in this and really provide sensitive information to us about their sexual well-being. So after, struggling with getting Facebook or social media ads approved, we decided to run some radio ads here in the Minneapolis area. And, it was relatively cheap. I was surprised how cheap radio ads can be. And this was kind of, during COVID, so the rates were down. But we ended up running some ads on KDWB, which is more of a female demographic, and then KQRS, which is more of a male demographic. And that really was a huge hit for us. We got a lot of leads and allowed us to recruit for our feasibility study, which ended up being a very positive study. The other setback and challenge, and we'll probably talk more about funding later, is the funding for us. I mean, we're a sexual health and wellness company, and many VCs have what's called vice clauses, where they don't invest in tobacco, firearms, sex-related products. And we try to educate, well, yeah, we are sex, but we're trying to solve for this, clear unmet need. It's such a new industry that's growing that many VCs don't have that experience in-house. So they're reluctant to A, make an investment in this taboo area, and B, they just don't have that experience. So that caused us really to say, okay, we got to step back and think of other ways to fund. And that was where we decided to go forward with crowdfunding, in addition to, angel investments. And then obviously the grant from Launch Minnesota was super helpful for us. But for us, given the classification of what we're in, has been some significant challenges from the VC side of things.
Yeah, for sure. Ashley?
Yeah, again, I know we'll touch on it later, but a huge challenge is getting funding in the door, especially when you're at the idea stage where you've got a concept, but it's the chicken or the egg. People want to see evidence of the concept's success in order to give you money to pursue the concept, but yet you need money to generate the product. So definitely I experienced that. Like I said, all of 2022 was working with this idea and trying to find low-cost ways to continue moving my business forward while I didn't yet have any money in the door. And for me, one way to overcome it that I would recommend to anybody struggling with something similar was customer discovery surveys, because that is market research that validates the need for your technology, and ended up being very convincing data when I did eventually pitch to, pitch competitions, investors, and applied for grant opportunities. I was showing that there was a big unmet need. There was a big demand. This problem wasn't singularly mine, it was ubiquitous, and that can be a strong precedent for receiving money to go solve that problem. The other thing that I did that may apply to some people was just look for existing evidence behind the premise of what I was trying to achieve. So you don't necessarily have to do all of the R&D for your own idea. There's likely existing evidence out there. And, Jeff and Michael have, quoted statistics that came before they even started their businesses too. But there's existing evidence out there for what you're trying to accomplish. And for me, that was within scientific literature. There were studies done with manual techniques that verified the concept that I was trying to pursue, just without a standardized product. So I was able to kind of use that scientific foundation and my own customer discovery research in order to finally lay a good foundation and pillar to start pitching the idea. And then lastly, I would just echo Michael that you do need to hone your story. So throughout the first year, I was actually presenting this pretty differently than how I currently present it today. And it's about paying attention to your audience, what your audience is looking for from you, and really trying out different things in how you tell your story in order for it to resonate. It's really easy for me to sell this idea to moms, but I have to pivot that in terms of VCs are looking for market opportunity and grant opportunities are looking for scientific validation. You have to really make sure that you're tailoring your story for your audience.
Absolutely. What about Raise a Hood?
Oh, I feel like I've made more mistakes than successes some days, so I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this. I think one thing that it's important to remember, and I suspect that Jeff and Ashley would probably back this up, which is doing a startup is hard on a whole bunch of levels. And I think I do see some people get into this and they go, oh, it's gonna be great, and I'm gonna be I'm gonna have a unicorn in 18 months and it's gonna be wonderful. And the path gets very narrow very quickly. And I do think there's a lot of errors with kind of, the VC model and the angel model. And I don't even really like the whole 10-minute pitch competition. It's like, well, just summarize your whole business in 10 minutes. And if you don't get that nailed, then, you're out of here. I look at that whole thing and I go, God, that's a little simplistic. But regardless, I mean, that's the model that they're in. And I think along that journey, there are 100 reasons why just to say, quit, stop. It doesn't make sense. You've gotten a bunch of negative feedback for the last 2 months, whatever it may be. And I think the two things are, you absolutely just be persistent to go push through it. But it's also why I think it's really helpful, at least for me, it was to try to surround myself by some smart people. And Jeff mentioned he was a Medtronic guy for a long time in BCS. And actually we have a Medtronic gentleman, former COO of Medtronic, that sits on our board, who I really enjoy. And I find when you're having those rough spots and you're going to hit them, is to have people that you actually trust to lean on to say, how do I help me navigate through this situation, whatever it may be. And people want to help. I mean, they really do. And I would argue if you have a hard time getting a good board, then that in of itself is maybe a problem that you can't even sell it to, people on your board. And so I think just surrounding yourself by the right, bright people to help you navigate the waters is incredibly important, because a lot of the errors, I think, often are strategic errors. They're not necessarily tactical errors. So I think if you have a good strategic direction and then you just have the grit and wherewithal to kind of overcome the speed bumps, because there'll be many, then I think you're on the right track for success. And if you can't get through that, then maybe you have to look in the mirror and say, well, maybe this isn't the right, business, and just be honest with yourself, because we all know not every startup succeeds.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of startups may start out in one trajectory, and 6 or 9 months later, they're pointed a slightly different direction because they're being responsive to what they've learned. I know so much more now 18 months later than I did when I started. And I'm sure Jeff and Ashley would kind of say the same thing, that, you don't realize how dumb you are until, until you've moved forward 18 months and you look back and you go, man, boy, I was being a little simplistic about my point of view, at the very beginning on that topic.
Yeah, for sure. Great advice. All right, so we've hinted at this a little bit, but let's dive in. Let's talk about funding. It's a huge hurdle for startups, regardless of stage, industry, sector. So could each of you share the strategies that your business is currently using or has used to finance its growth?
So we initially, looked to the typical friends and family network. So myself and then two business partners were the founders of the company. So we had, 3 of us really reaching out to our networks, and we were very fortunate to raise $650,000 through friends and family. And that also comes with challenges, right? I mean, these are your friends, your family. And for me, it was the first fundraise I ever did. So I was really uncomfortable asking for money, right? Putting at that time, it was just a concept, right? So these investors weren't necessarily investing in the product, they were investing in me and the others on the team. And then once we got through that money, then it was like, okay, we need another $1 million. And how are we going to do that when we weren't having any luck with the VC community? A lot of interest from the VC community, but they wanted to see milestones. They wanted to see FDA clearance. They wanted to see revenue traction. So then we had to go and open up another round, which was a safe round and again, that's angel investors. And we had one family office invest in that, as well as some additional friends and family. And then we got to the next milestone and said, okay, well, now we need to raise another tranche of money to get to design freeze. And that's where we decided to run the crowdfunding campaign. And we had debated it internally amongst the board for a long time, because some of the feedback that we heard is venture capital doesn't look at crowdfunding very favorably. They look at it as a funding of last resort. And we were concerned about that. We didn't want that to be a negative at some point down the road when we had VC opportunity. But then we looked at what are the positives? Well, it's an opportunity where you can build a community of people following the company and advocates. Not only are they putting their money into the company, they're also likely customers. And then we could also test messaging well before FDA clearance. So we looked at all those different factors and decided that we got to give it a shot. And we didn't know what to expect. And you spend a lot of time and money preparing for it, from financial reviews to legal reviews to marketing prep. And you just don't know what's going to come out on the other end. So, the first few days, I'm sitting at my computer and you literally see these, the total going up and up and up, and you get really excited about that. And then you have this plateau period, and then you have this other increase when you get close to the end. And that's all stuff that the campaign coached us on. But having never gone through it before, you get this range of emotions where you're super excited, then you're like, okay, what's happening? And then you get excited again. And, Michael kind of touched on this. I think that's one of the things as a startups founder that you have to manage is the range of emotions. I mean, literally any day or within a few hours, you can be on top of the world and then something happens and then you're down here, and you just got to manage those emotions and try to figure out how to keep that level set, because you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. On the funding side, it's going to seem like it takes forever, which it does. And we're still fundraising, right? You're never done with it. And one of my early advisors gave me some advice. He said, Jeff, if you're going to get into this, know that 100% of your time is raising money, 50% of it's running a business. I'm like, how difficult can this be? We just won this Procter & Gamble pitch. We got all this PR. Little did I know that's significant. I mean, I don't know if 100% of my time is fundraising, but a significant part is, but you're always raising. And that, to Michael's point, can be a grind. I mean, you got to have a thick skin. You got to accept no, not take it personally, and use that no as motivation to get that next investor in the house. But not easy, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Ashley, talk a little bit about the non-dilutive funding path that you followed.
Yeah, so I grew up on food stamps. So for anyone else in my boat whose friends and family aren't necessarily high net worth individuals, that can be really tough, because a lot of times that is the first recommendation, is to go to friends and family for that first raise. And that unfortunately wasn't an option for me. I did find luck. I think one of the things that you can do when you have a business idea is just have conversations. No conversation isn't worth your time, because you never know who someone knows or what opportunity they're aware of. And that is how I did open my pre-seed investment round, which has largely been filled by angel investors that I met through connections, by pitch competitions and exposure like that. So just because your own personal network may not be able to be those angel investors in your business doesn't mean that those angel investors don't exist. It's just a matter of kind of getting into the right crowds and having the right conversations, which sometimes is kind of a shotgun approach. You just have to be willing to have a lot of conversations in order to find the people willing to take that early risk. So, angel investments are definitely one route you can take early on. But like I said, I've actually been able to raise most of the money for my business through non-dilutive mechanisms, largely grant opportunities. And the reason why that had worked well for me is because in my experience, they're willing to go for higher risk ideas. So even if you don't yet have robust R&D data, if you have that scientific foundation, if you have customer discovery, R&D, or anything of that sort, maybe you do have garage style prototyping and early data for your product, you can piece that together into a story for a grant application. And there are mechanisms. It's called the SBIR program. Small Business Innovation Research is our federal grant program for small businesses. There are lots of different disciplines for where you can apply. There are high-tech disciplines, women's health disciplines, anything that you can think of, you usually can find a funding institute for. And I would throw applications their way for consideration. In my experience, it took me a few tries. So don't try once, hear a no, and get discouraged. Try once, hear a no, and pivot and keep trying. I ended up getting my grant on the third try, and it wasn't a waste of time. That's $250,000 non-dilutively that I can now invest into R&D for my idea and for my company in the stage we're at. That's really transformative and will allow me to get that more robust R&D that I can take to VC investors who might be a little bit more wary of investing in extremely early stage businesses. So I would highly encourage anybody to look into those programs.
That's awesome. And that is, I got to do a plant for, we did a Friday Forum back in July with Pat Dillon from the MNSBIR Accelerator. So if you want to learn more about that program, I recommend listening to that one. All right. And Michael.
On the fundraising side, I don't know if there's a silver bullet out there. I listened to Jeff talk about this doing the crowdsourced, and I don't know the answer on crowdsource. I still hear also from some funds that once you've gone crowdsourced, that it's still there's an air of, oh, you couldn't get VC funding, so you went crowdsource. I don't know if that's true or not. I just don't know the answer, but I know there is that lingering question out there, I think, by some. I think to the point that Ashley made is, if you can get non-dilutive, it's awesome, right? It's wonderful. The downside with that is, I've also heard, and maybe you could even speak to this, Ashley, that the application process can be quite arduous. And so I think that the question that you always have to come back to is, you go, okay, I have limited amount of time. What's the Jeff made a comment. He said you have to spend half your time fundraising. I feel like you build a startup and you're working 80 to 90 hours a week building a company, and then the other half raising funds. And so I think for us, we did tap into the angel network early. What I liked about the angel network, and friends and family and colleagues, and people are looking for good investments if they believe in you. And that was Ashley's point. If they believe in you and believe in the idea, you also start to get this network of people that are deeply invested in making this thing successful. So I think there is wisdom in trying to pick up some pre-seed money from actual angels, because they believe in the idea and they believe in you. And that in turn opens up a lot of doors. So I think that is a very effective way to gain some early work. I think once you start getting into the seed round, it does get a little bit more murky. The market has been really poor for the last 18 months. And so while you're going through that, I think one of the errors that some founders make is you tend to overspend, and you go, oh my goodness, I got $500,000 in the bank, or whatever the number is, it's going to be fine. You're going to hit lean points, believe me. So treat every dollar very respectfully. I appreciate Ashley's point about coming from a modest background. Many of us have, and it causes you to just be a little more fiscally responsible. And I think that's important in a startup, because once you also get to a point where you're standing in front of real investors, they go, okay, I have X amount of dollars in the business, and what have I actually accomplished? And that represents value. So you have to go out to these investors to say, hey, we invested this amount of money very wisely, and we got all of this stuff accomplished, because that in and of itself is a testament to your leadership skills and your fiscal skills. And so don't underestimate how important that is. So the fact that you're running on something lean just means that you're being an appropriate manager and you're spending your capital wisely. So I don't know if there's a silver bullet out there, I think is all that I'm saying. But be methodical in your approach, and you never know where one VC may lead to another VC. I think people want to help fundamentally. I think sometimes it's hard for us to go, hey, I have the best idea in the world, and here's the proposal, and I'm just looking for a, $30,000 investment, and then here's all the reasons why. And then they turn you down, and you're like, and you get turned down again and again and again and again and again. And that becomes difficult. I think the thing you have to recognize is, from their perspective, they may specialize in a very specific sector at a very specific time frame through the rounding. They may do seed and pre-seed only. They often focus on SaaS models, whatever it may be. And so when you start narrowing it down, you got to go through a lot of VCs to find the one that's the right fit. It's a little bit like dating, right? You may meet a lot of people online or in the bars or where at school and only a very rare few are actually a good fit for you. And I think finding capital is kind of the same way. You have to find the capital that's the right fit. And so don't take it as a criticism that it's not a fit. It just means that you need to keep looking for the best fit. I also think maybe a little bit like looking for a good spouse is that you want to be thoughtful for the long term, because sometimes it's easier to get money that's not good money. What you're always going after is money that's smart money. So if you start to play the longer game and say, how does this fit into my overall cap table when I'm going after a Series A 2 years from now? And do they bring anything to the table other than just capital? Do they bring other partners, expertise, a track record of investing in the XYZ? They want to make you successful. So you want to bring on money that also has something in terms of their alliances and relationships that can add to your business as your business begins to grow.
Great, thank you. Okay, I want to make sure I'm going to make this our last question, because I want to make sure we got time for questions from the audience. So let's talk about scaling a startup. What strategies have you employed to scale your business effectively? And were there any specific milestones or strategies that helped you achieve, some sort of significant growth?
So for us, we're pre-revenue. We have not yet have FDA approval, so we're not selling product. But what we're setting the stage to do is finding those distribution partners where we don't have to build a warehouse and inventory product. Where are those fulfillment centers that will manage the orders, manage the shipping, manage the returns, and all that's free. You don't have to. Other than my time, you can begin that well in advance of launch. So that's what we're preparing for. In addition to that, we're preparing to find that right marketing partner that will help us take the product and message it. And one of the early things that we found is, and I think Ashley mentioned this as well, is you pivot on your message. And we thought, well, premature ejaculation, it's all about the guy. Well, it is, but ultimately it's about partner satisfaction. If someone lasts 30 seconds, their partner's like, really, that's it? There's disappointment, there's frustration. So now we're kind of pivoting the messaging, not pivoting the message, but you're really looking at what is that right messaging for the partner and what is that message for the couple. So all that work can be going on while we wait for FDA clearance, and it doesn't take a lot of money to do that. And then, leverage other resources. We reached out to the Carlson School of Management and Dave Hopkins, which leads the Brand Institute there, and had a group of MBA students help us on some customer discovery, some branding. And that was extremely valuable. You got smart people, motivated people. These kids were fighting for the opportunity to work on a Merari project versus General Mills, cereal packaging exercise. This was something new and fun for them. And they came back with this 100-page deck that was McKinsey level stuff. And it's like, holy cow. This is great. So to Michael's point, people are willing to help. There's whether it's St. Thomas, whether it's EU, whether it's Mayo Clinic, there's lots of people out there to lean on, for what you're trying to do. So, we know we're going to have all kinds of challenges with scale. Our product development partner also owns a manufacturing facility in Vietnam. So that's where we're going to manufacture the product. So fortunately for us, I don't have to worry about finding the right manufacturing facility because I know nothing about operations and supply chain. But our product development partner not only develops the product, but they do the manufacturing. So that's really going to help us. So that's set up and ready for us to scale when we get to that point.
That's awesome. I'm really glad you mentioned that because there's a similar group at the University of Minnesota called Design U. It's a pro bono student consulting group. And actually right now they're looking for clients to basically just help for free for their next semester, which goes mid-January through April. And you can just like email them and tell them that you're looking for some assistance. I'm putting a link to I did a little blurb about it in our newsletter this month. So you can learn more about that there, and their contact info is in there as well. So yes, universities are an awesome resource. Right,
The other
Ashley?
point that's maybe worth.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Mike.
All right, go ahead, Ashley. There's a time delay here.
No, go ahead, take it.
I was just going to make a point that I think we talk about fundraising. I think the other one you always want to be thoughtful on is capital. I mean, equity. And this is a harder one. And there's two schools of thought, and I don't know if I have the right answer, but I'll kind of tell you the pros and cons. Is on the one hand, people will say, keep all of your equity dry, right? Give away as little as you can because you're going to want every ounce of it in the future for a whole bunch of reasons. One, you're trying to make some money. Secondly, more importantly, is that's important when the VCs come along and you're going to have enough of the company left that you could actually go do something with it, right? Which is all very true. On the other hand, I have found that giving out small stakes of equity to a broader swath of people becomes a very large incentive. And in our case, we're even working with mechanics, helping to train an AI engine, and giving away a small stake of equity is a great way to incentivize people, because ultimately everybody on this call is they're pursuing a dream, right? They're trying to create something, larger than what they were doing 2 years ago. But there's a lot of people in the world that just don't have a chance to even get equity. And so the fact that you can sit down with them and say, okay, we want to give you a small grant or a grant, and you probably want to file an 83B for taxation purposes, which are things they're typically never involved with. And all of a sudden they have this incentivized stake in the company. Then they want you to succeed. So not only do you want your investors to want you to succeed, but you want all the people that surround you to be as equally excited about the business. You're going to have a bunch of people involved with the business that are not working for you full time. They're not taking a paycheck. And so I have found that small equity grants are also a very good way to incentivize people to help you row your boat the direction you're trying to go.
Awesome.
All right. And I know we want to save time for questions, so I'll try to keep this brief. But in terms of scaling a business, I'm very early stage with Mommy's Solutions, but I think something that's really important is to always be looking ahead for what's next and what those key milestones are. Don't get stuck with your nose in a book, like there's a lot of immediate needs when you're starting a business and getting it off of the ground, but you want to make sure that you're always prepared for that next step. So when the money comes in the door, you can act fast and use it intelligently and really impress people and maintain that momentum. So, I would just echo, have conversations early. I identified my, contract engineering firm early before I even had the money to engage with them. I had a lot of conversations so that the second the money was in the door, I could work with someone that I trusted. And through their parent company, I also have a route down the road towards sales and distributions in a textile industry. So just be looking ahead, have your chess pieces in place so that you can keep momentum as these milestones are hit, as opposed to hitting a milestone, stopping and thinking, okay, now what do I do next? It's a lot to balance as a startup founder, but part of your role as the founder and executive position within the business is to have that big picture landscape in mind.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to open it up to the audience. We obviously have three great founders here today at various different stages and industries. So what questions do you have for them? I will allow a few more seconds of awkward pause, and then if not, I do have one more question that we can go through. Well, I'm just going to assume I have a question that everybody else wants to know. So anyone feel free to, to take this in any capacity at any time. So if, you know, a lot of people may be just beginning their startup journey, what advice would you give for them based on your experiences? Are there any essential qualities or practices you believe are crucial for success in the startup world? We've talked about this a little bit today, but any last pieces of wisdom?
Yeah, well, certainly you've got to be prepared to, hear no a lot, right? You're going to hear it every day, whether it's from investors, whether it's from, companies that you want to partner with down the road, and recognize that no can be not yet in many cases. You've got to, show progress that's made. So you just can't take it personally. Personally, I wish I would have started this venture earlier than I did. I sat on the idea for a few years, I had kids in college, so financially it was like, I'm not willing to take that risk, but I wish I would have done it earlier. And for me, it was, I had to get comfortable with, do I really want to tell my wife and friends that I'm going to start the sexual wellness company? I mean, what are people going to think of me, right? And for a long time, that weighed on my shoulders. Like, do I want to come out and be public as the PE, the premature ejaculation guy? But once I made that decision and did it, wow, the weight was lifted off my shoulder. I haven't met one person that said, Jeff, what are you doing? You're wasting your time. It's been quite the opposite. So to have that courage to kind of step out and do something that you're passionate about and that you believe is an opportunity based on your research, go for it, because simple ideas often get missed and ultimately can become unicorn type opportunities.
Sure. We have a good question from Ryan in the chat. How do you guys manage your time? For example, how do you hold a job and push a startup forward? It seems like startup culture frowns on people trying to grow a startup as a side hustle. Anyone feel free to take that.
I started mine as a side hustle. I think the terminology minimizes what you're trying to accomplish. So I wouldn't necessarily classify Mommy Solutions as a side hustle. I positioned it as a passion project once it was in its earliest stages and I was getting it off the ground, because I always really wanted to convey that there was passion behind what I was trying to accomplish and I was motivated to succeed. And I would say if it's a side hustle for you, which for a lot of people it is at the very beginning, it's hard to take that leap into full-time work right away. I would just say outcomes are a lagging measure of your habits. So you might not be able to accomplish a 10-hour workday on top of a full-time job, but just have a daily habit of moving forward in some way or another, and it will add up. The outcomes will happen. It doesn't have to be moving mountains every day. It can just be thinking about the business. I mean, obviously, if you're starting it, honestly, it's worrying in the back of your mind, the business model in general. That's what was happening to me. I was spending a lot of time thinking about it before I pulled the trigger as well. And that's work. That's work that you're dedicating to that business. It's time and effort and thought in order to make that idea succeed. So don't minimize what you're doing. If it's a side hustle, pivot that to a passion project. It is what you're passionate about. There's a reason you're thinking about it, and know that your daily habits will add up.
I would add to that, Ashley, that, I mean, for me, one of the things I struggle with, and I think other founders may as well, is how do you separate yourself? How do you take away time where you can focus with your family, or in my case, my wife and kids, and not be thinking about the business? Because as founders, it's 24/7, 365, and there's always something you're thinking about. And the challenge is, how do you balance, right? How do you have that balance for family and fun and other things, and then focus on the business? And for me, it's a struggle. It's a constant struggle, because we work out of the home and the office is here, and there's always something going on, right? But you need to step away, and I continue to struggle with that. And I don't have the right answer, but if you're thinking about getting into the startup world, know that that's going to be something that you're always thinking about. My wife reminds me, she's like, "You're not listening to me right now. You're thinking about the company." Well, you're right, I am. And how do I manage that? I don't have the right answer. So if anybody does, I'd love to hear it.
You know what I was going to suggest, though, Jeff, if you need any help, we have some solutions for water pumps out there. And I thought maybe you could learn something from our water pump solutions for your business. That was my joke for a Friday morning. That's as good as they get. I mean, somebody laugh at it, would you?
Got to keep our panelists happy. Okay. All right. I will wrap it up and bring it to a close. Thank you everyone so much for joining. I'm going to give one quick plug to Minnesota Ventures. That is a great opportunity for startups of all stages. It's something that we do with the University of Minnesota that's coming up on October 17th. Applications are due on the 25th. Really, all you need to do is submit a pitch deck to the U, or, just send in your pitch deck to venture@umn.edu by the end of the day on Monday. And then you can pitch to a whole audience of investors, both from Minnesota and across the nation. And it's not a community pitch event. It's really dedicated just to founders, just to investors. So yeah, that's going to be our last one of the year on October 17th. But aside from that, thanks everyone for coming today. Thank you to our founders for sharing your startup journeys. I hope everyone had a wonderful Twin Cities Startup Week. Enjoy your weekend, and I will connect with all of you soon. Have a good one.
Thank
Have a
you.
good weekend.
Bye-bye.